Okay, thank you very much, Michael. Everybody can hear me? Perfect. Well, good morning from the West Coast. I'm Brian Martin, the rates analyst with the City of Sacramento Department of Utilities. I've worked in public sector finance for over 8 years now, four of those with the City of Sacramento. Before we get started today, I would like to thank Michael Nicolescu, the Synario team, and each of you for the opportunity for Dean, Tyler, and I to share with you kind of how we benefited from the Synario software, including our best practices, lessons learned, and a demonstration of how we've kind of configured Synario for our rate model software system, which we procured just back in October of 2020. At the city, the Department of Utilities manages the water, wastewater, and storm drainage systems. And Dean Fujimoto, Tyler Stratton, and I are responsible for long-range financial projects for the water, wastewater, and storm drainage funds. So for today, we'll be starting off with a brief survey so we can get to know each other a little bit better and give us some key insights on areas you may be interested in us for us to highlight. Then Dean will share some challenges associated with our previous Excel rate model that kind of created our why. Then I'll highlight some solutions and efficiencies of the Synario rate model software system that we've gained. And lastly, he will briefly talk a little bit about our public procurement process and our smooth implementation. Then following that, Tyler Stratton, our capital finance and grant manager, will provide an overview of our new rate model software system, demonstrate some of the efficiencies and benefits in our rate model, and share a couple of examples of how DOU is using that rate model to make projections for our capital projects funded by cash bonds and different mixes of fundings.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Really appreciate it. Good morning. I'm Dean Fujimoto, Long Range Financial Planning Manager with the City of Sacramento Department of Utilities. I've worked in the public sector a little over 28 years, of which 23 of those years has been managing government finances. The last 8.5 or so has been with the City of Sacramento, with the last 3.5 with the Department of Utilities. Now, today, what I'd like to do is highlight some of the efficiencies that we gained by transitioning to the Synario rate model system. And based on the poll, it looks like many of you have probably dealt with some of the issues I'm going to quickly share in relation to our 2013 Excel rate model. So as Brian mentioned, we managed 3 funds. So previously we had to have version control for 3 different Excel files, one for water, one for wastewater, and one for storm drainage. In addition, each time we created scenarios for our executive team, we could potentially save up to 6 to 9 versions of the 3, funds and so forth. So it's very time-consuming, process for us. In addition to that, we would print out various copies. We'd go to the executive team meetings. They would ask intuitive questions such as, can we afford $20 million for a project? Or what if we, deferred maintenance on another project? And at that time, we would take precarious notes, go back to our desk, and try and reschedule with the executive team. And many of you probably realize how difficult that may be. The good news right now is we can do live updates during meetings. We can, add the 20 million on the spot. Our decision makers can make decisions, which is much more efficient for all of us. In addition, and I forgot to mention before, rather than 3 rate models, currently we just have the scenario system and we toggle between the 3 funds. So it's definitely much more efficient. The last area I'd like to highlight is our data input. Many of you may have had similar situations. For us, whenever we inputted our budget or mid-year adjustments or any augmentations, we would have to input close to 1,000, if not more, object codes for our budget for each of the 3 funds. We'd spend probably 2 to 3 hours of staff time to, QA QC the system. And now we have a flat file. We do some minor adjustments and we upload the data. So we definitely have more time to be spent on analysis. So now let me kind of talk briefly about our implementation process. So, we are a public agency. Oh, there's some background. So we are a public agency, and we do have strict procurement requirements. So what we did was we issued an RFP, and our goal was, because we knew that our Excel version was pretty much met its it was dated, it was very cumbersome, and so forth. So we specifically asked for proposers that currently at least had a rate model system with one utility provider. And luckily, and we are so happy that we selected the Synario software system. And let me tell you, in my 28 years working in government and implementing software systems, this was the smoothest implementation in my entire career. We started the process in October of 2020, and by mid-November of 2020, so you're talking about 6 weeks, we were able to retire our 2013 rate model. And this was really thanks to the effort of Michael and the Synario team. We didn't have to do any data input. They uploaded all the data into the new Synario rate model system. And also another kind of interesting factor, when we did our QA/QC, we found a 99.6% accuracy rate. Now, you may ask yourself, what happened to the 0.04%? The irony of the matter, Synario was 100%. And we found buried in one of our multiple worksheets, we must have inadvertently, years ago, we don't know when it happened, we overrid a formula. So in essence, the Synario system was 100% accurate. So based on that, I'd like to turn it over to Tyler Stratton, who's going to kind of run through some efficiencies and share our rate model. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dean. Hello, all. My name is Tyler Stratton, and I'm the Capital Finance and Grants Manager with the City of Sacramento Department of Utilities. I've worked on many utilities and public works projects with the city for the past 18 years, and this project has definitely been a fun one to be a part of. Even though we may be in different sectors today, we all have a need to track our beginning balances, our revenues, our expenses, and ending fund balances to manage our budgets and our long-range planning efforts here. I'm going to go ahead and show you a demo of our rate model, our Synario rate modeling software system here. So let me go ahead and switch over. A couple things I want to review today with you are, first I want to get you oriented with our cash flow summary. It's the main report that we use with our executive team so that they can help with their decision making there. And then we'll run through a couple different initiatives, cash funding, capital improvement projects. We can look at debt financing, a CIP, and then how we would recommend rate increases based on those debt funding scenarios there. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hop over to our system here. Oh, and I timed out, unfortunately, but I'll log in quickly here. All right, now as we've mentioned, we maintain 3 funds for the City of Sacramento Department of Utilities, right? We maintain water, wastewater, and storm drainage funds. And you can see in our slide deck here that we have those baseline models set up for us there. We're gonna focus in on our water fund today, and I'm gonna orient you to our cash flow summary here. So this report is the main report that we use to visualize our impacts to our budgets here. We're looking at a 10-year summary. We can also toggle over to a 30-year, but the 10-year look will be appropriate for now. And then, as we go through, this is just basically looking at our savings account, right? So we're looking at our beginning balance here, and you can see our revenues. And our revenue and our expense data here is all driven, as Dean mentioned, from that flat file that we get from our budget team. We're able to upload that data, and it matches to all the different object codes that you'll see in here. Now, this was a huge efficiency gain for us. As you can see in our revenues, we are heavily dependent on utility service charges. That makes up a huge component of our revenues. And as I drill in even further, you can see here, on employee expenses, we would have had to have manually typed in all of these object codes here into our Excel files, leaving room for lots of opportunity for manual error. And this is just one fund, mind you. We have 3 funds that we're managing. So being able to upload the data has tremendously been a huge efficiency for us, time saver, accuracy, all that good stuff there. Okay, so again, we're looking at our beginning balance, our revenues, and our operating expenses here. We also have our debt service line. Our debt service line is actually pulled from a different slide here. We have a debt service summary slide that has all of our existing principal and interest payments lined out for their terms. And that is feeding our debt service line here as an expense. We are also subject to a general fund tax. And our general fund tax, this is a great opportunity to show the explain feature that we love to use for transparency on any of the values that we have in our rate model. So our general fund tax is actually a calculation. And you can see here that we are using our service revenues and subtracting out our bad debt expense and multiplying it by the rate of 11%, which is the city council approved and has been tried in through courts, but it's been upheld. 11% tax on our revenues there that goes to the general fund. So just this is a great way, we can click on any number throughout here and run this explain feature, whether it's a formula or a data-driven value, so that we can see and be transparent with what our data is here. This has been a great tool for our decision makers here. Okay, so again, revenues, expenses, we get down to our net operating, and then we have what we look at, because we're heavily reliant on our capital improvement projects here. And what we do is we budget our capital improvements for 5 years, and then we kind of forecast out what our capital improvements are going to be in the out years there, based on an average of the first 5 years here. At the end of the day, we're left with our ending fund balance. So this is what's left in the savings account. And you can see that going down over time. And this is also driven by what we have are cost drivers that apply to the base year. So we have our base year of data. And then in our future years here, they're all being driven by cost drivers, which I'll show you down below. These are really the key metrics that we look at, and they are driven by our debt covenants that we have with bonds and our SRF low interest loans, our state revolving fund loans. Our debt coverage target that we have to maintain is 1.2 times. And then our days of working capital here, our target is 120. And what we've gotten configured in our rate model is anytime we dip below our target, you can see that it highlights the model yellow and calls our attention to it so that we could take some action. Now, this is letting us know that we would definitely need, in order to maintain our debt commitments here, we would need a rate adjustment prior to FY29 so that we can bring our debt coverage or our days of working capital up above our key target here. So this is really the tool and the thing that we are looking at here to make decisions based on projects and projected costs. As I scroll down on our cash flow summary, we have taken our key metrics and visualized them. We have our days of working capital and our debt service coverage here. You can see our target moving through here where we're in the good, and then we dip below that target in that FY29. Debt service coverage ratio target running across here, and we're healthy in the water fund at the moment. We have another chart here to visualize our year-to-year revenues versus our expenses. You can see our revenues here staying fairly flat, escalating a little bit there. And then you can see each year by year, we have our operating expenses stacked with our debt services, capital improvements, and then our general fund tax expenses there, just to kind of give us a glance at the year-to-year health there. Now, I mentioned that the model is being projected by cost drivers, and you can see here that we have revenue assumptions. We can put any kind of revenue assumptions going for our cost drivers. And then we have our expense assumptions. So for every one of those categories that we have, we can apply these cost drivers to escalate them appropriately throughout the model there. For our capital improvement program, we've decided to make it a typed in field so that if throughout the year there's something that changes, we can be nimble and respond to that change quickly and have it shine through in the model. So this has just been a way that we've gotten this configured to be nimble and respond to any operational needs. So with that in mind and operational needs in mind, what I want to do is show you how we actually use this tool for decision making. And we do that in we really leverage our initiative builder here. And so, and it really pulls in some initiatives into this cash flow summary. But first, a little orientation here. what we have up at the top, and as we go through this this slide here, you can see these are all initiatives and projects that our organization has and that we are modeling these costs here. I'm going to key into a couple. I'm going to key into this Water Plus, which is a water treatment expansion project, and we're going to have some debt servicing. But the first one I want to look at is our capital reserve target. So we're building in right now a capital reserve for the water fund. And you can see that we're projecting a cost of about $25 million in FY23, and then $7.5 million contribution in the subsequent years there. For this initiative, this is the only cost that we have configured. We do have the ability to do one-time or ongoing operational revenue impacts or expense impacts. Same thing, we could do one-time or ongoing there. And this helps for budget projections and such there. But let's focus back in on water and on the capital reserve target that I was looking at there. And just to kind of orient ourselves again, you know, we have our cash flow summary, and really the target here that we're looking at is this in FY29 is when we're dipping below our 120 days of working capital, right? So I'm going to go ahead and expand our CIP program, and we're going to go ahead and turn on that capital reserve into here. And as I toggle that on, we can now see those new expenses shining through in our CIP program here. So that 25 million contribution and the 7.5 million contribution in those subsequent years. Now, what this did is it moved our need for a rate adjustment, which was, if you recall, we had 106 days in FY29, and it has moved that need for a rate adjustment up to FY28, which makes sense. If we're pulling from available cash, right, we're pulling from our available ending fund balance here, it's going to push that need up for a rate adjustment sooner. And so but this is how we would demonstrate you know, a cash funded scenario. So the executive team would say, hey, can we afford you know, this capital reserve program? We would say yes, but oh no, we would say yes, and our rate adjustment need would be 1 year sooner than the base model here. Okay, so that's a cash funded example here. Now what I'd like to share is our debt funded scenario. Okay, so as we were talking about, we have a project right now that we are modeling, and it's for the expansion of some water treatment plants to the tune of 75 million gallons a day to keep up with development that's happening in the city. And this is a costly project here. You can see that what we're modeling here, we're going to be modeling about a $51 million loan in FY24, almost $56 million loan in 25, and then almost a $1.4 billion loan in FY26. Looking at that fund health, I know already that this is going to hurt the fund. You can see that we have our options. The last scenario that we looked at, or last initiative that we looked at, I'm sorry, was all funded by PAYGO, by our cash. What we have the option now to show is our debt funding and our debt funded expenditures as well. So we have those modeled in there for the years that the loans would be taken out and the contracts would be executed. And as I scroll to the right here, looking at these white rows here, we're able to define our terms. So we've set our terms at a 35-year. We're assuming about a bond or like I said, a low interest loan from our state revolving fund with about a 4% interest rate for our planning purposes. And we're looking at that as new debt that we'd be taking on. And this is key because of how this is going to shine through in the model here. So let's go on down. I'm going to go ahead and turn on that initiative so we can see the impacts. And we are at initiative 1 here. It's at 75 million gallons per day. Oh boy, and I'm already seeing a lot of red, which in the modeling world, you'll know that is not the best thing. But okay, let's see. This is an operational need. Let's see how we can address it, right? And this is big dollars we're talking about here. So as you can see now, our debt proceeds are now coming in and our expenses are going out in those years because we would be executing contracts in those years. And in addition to it shining through in our CIP, you can also see it shine through in our debt service and how our debt services increases significantly here. So you can see after the first two loans, our debt service escalates here from $2 to $5 million. And this is just on this initiative here, showing that separate row. And then it goes up to this $82 million annually. So, you know, we would need to be able to support that, right? Yes, and right. So there's not. This is if our executive team wants to move forward, we're gonna need to figure out how we get there, right? And clearly, this is sinking our fund entirely. We are not able to maintain our bond covenants that and agreements that we had for our debt coverage or our days of working capital here. So one of the solutions that we built in is, okay, how do we achieve this? If we wanted to, support this through user fees or our rates, how would we do that? And so one thing that we've got configured in here is a rate increase toggle, where we can go to a calculated rate increase for us. With those initiatives in, what this toggle does is it looks at our key metrics, and anytime it dips below our targets, it's going to throw out the dollar amount and the percentage increase that's going to be needed for that year in order to keep us whole on our targets here. So now you can see no more yellow, no more red. All we need is an aggregate amount of about 105 million annually, and running these numbers here, maybe to the tune of about 74-ish% of a rate increase, which is very steep, of course, you know, and may not be politically palatable. But how we would look at that is the aggregate amount, and we would try to smooth that over, you know, a several-year time frame there to make it a little more politically palatable, and try to get the support of the city manager's office and the city council there. So this tool has been very powerful. We don't always look at costs that are this extreme, but this was just an opportunity to share, you know, the functionality of our calculated rate adjustments and how we can look at our long range financial planning efforts here and respond to our organizational needs. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and switch back over to our presentation here and try to get through so we can get to some questions. Okay, so a summary of what we talked about today is we reviewed our cash flow summary and how we're leveraging our you know, basically our existing Excel file and our report that we use, but converted that into this scenario rate model. Looked at all these different features here, our cash flow summary lines. You can really see how the data uploads, you know, increased our efficiency and our accuracy for all those object codes that were in there. We ran that explain feature to show any data point, you know, where that comes from, if it's calculated or if it's a set data point. We really keyed into our key metrics, our targets of what we're looking for, and kind of reviewed our charts and our entry tables. Oops, I'm sorry. And then we looked at those initiatives and scenarios. We looked at those three different scenarios there. We had a cash funding of our capital reserve there, and we did that debt financing of the Water Plus program. And then we looked at how we can toggle on rate increases based on those funding needs, and what that was going to cost our ratepayers, and how we would politically get there.
Before we move on, we're just going to get to know you a little bit better. Here's a short poll so we can have a better understanding of who we're talking to. So the next one is, are you dependent on user fees or rates for revenues? So as a public organization in California, we are governed by Proposition 218. So this provides a lot of regulatory requirements for how we're able to increase our rates. This can lead to our revenues being fairly static, as roughly 95% of our revenues are derived from rates for water, wastewater, and storm drainage service. Great. So do you manage capital assets? So at the City of Sacramento, we obviously, as a water utility, we manage and maintain lots of different types of assets, an example of which being like water treatment plants, among a whole slew of other different kinds of capital assets. This affects things like our planning and forecasting, capital improvement plans, and kind of things all along those lines. Okay, prior to your transition to the Synario software system, did you use Excel in your agency to track, estimate, and project revenues and/or expenditures? So this is, you know, the monster Excel doc, right? That everyone has, the big budget document, the 30 megabyte worksheet. change one or two variables, and all of a sudden it's a 5-minute wait while we're computing. And a solid yes is coming through. Awesome. I'm glad we're all coming from a really similar place then. All right, we can go on to the next one. And this one might be a little bit pretty similar. Our next question is, was that Excel file very extensive, with multiple worksheets, tabs, multiple links with formulas, big summaries of estimates? Not to mention any issues that arise from, version control or being able to send it back and forth. Oh yeah, 100% so far. All right. Well, thank you very much for all your responses. It's been really interesting. Kind of shows the kind of lay of the land, demographics of who's all here.
At this point, I'm going to turn it over. This is one of those beautiful water treatment plants that we're looking to improve and enhance so that future development would benefit from that there. At this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to any kind of questions that we receive here. Michael, were you going to moderate those questions, or did you want us to just kind of pull from the chat here?
Yeah, so I just put in a comment into the chat box here to try and track some of these. Folks, feel free to post your question in the chat, but you can also use the Q&A tab. That way others can see it and like it if, by any chance they had a similar question. One question that we do want to ask here is, you all have 3 users. So how do you typically divvy up the modeling work with the platform?
That's great. That's a great question. And so, really, I think the modeling work starts with the program needs, right? So where it all starts is by gathering that program data. And so we got to work with our engineering team to get their cost data. As we know, those numbers can be a moving target over time, especially with the inflation that we've been experiencing and based on when projects were scoped in the past. So initially, how we divvy that up is, our team will actually meet with our engineering teams and have the discussions, ask the questions so that we can get accurate data. From there, typically Brian would be going in the back end and setting up our initiatives, on the power user side and getting everything set up and configuring it. And then he would kick that over to me to kind of QA and QC and make sure that everything is shining through the model correctly. And then from there, we would meet with our project teams to review, the outputs and see if any adjustments needed to be made.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Tyler. Got a couple other questions here that went through the chat. And again, reminder for those who are trying to get their questions in, use the chat feature or just click on the Q&A tab. That way we can track them. How did you learn about Synario?
Yeah, excellent. Good. Dean, you want to cover this one from the procurement side?
Sure. Yes, actually, through a partnership with one of the other water districts, they were actually utilizing the Synario rate model system, and they did a quick demo for us, and we were excited about the efficiencies that they gained, and so that kind of led us to issue the RFP. But we've been happy ever since.
Great. Yeah, thank you both. I think we had a question that was asked, I want to say early on during the session when we were going through some of the polling questions, which actually that reminds me, because I think we did get some comments regarding having some technical difficulties with the polling questions. If anyone was attempting to answer those, did not get a chance to, and you're hoping to complete those for CP credits or anything like that, please reach out to us after the fact, to myself and to Alexia. We can supply those questions so that you can get that filled out. Question to Dean and team here, though, that was asked during that time is, have you had to spend weeks rebuilding Excel? This is pre-Synario. After the person who built it left, no one understood how it worked. I know with your particular situation, was there any kind of burden that you were experiencing on the Excel side of things that you have found alleviated by moving over into software?
Sure. How about Tyler? Let me kind of start and feel free to, add additional. So, I just shared a few of them, but it was a very cumbersome system. And just to save, we'd have the hourglass going, and then to save different versions, and we had to do it on a shared drive, and so Tyler and I would, and before you know it, the name of the file is so long because it has my initials, Tyler's initials, other people's. And then even finding the input cells, because we had to both roll up our sleeves and learn this thing. It was like Hansel and Gretel. We had to go across the worksheets under these multiple links that were very complex, if then formulas and so forth. And it was just so time consuming to input the data, do our QA, QC, and then do those, follow-up questions and so forth. So, but Tyler, feel free to, chime in on anything else.
No, you hit it on the head. And not to mention that for us, when the previous person who owned the rate model, or who was working the rate model, he retired, and he did not share any of that institutional knowledge. So it was really Dean coming in to understand that rate model, and then me coming on board to try to kind of get up to speed as well. And so yeah, there was, we didn't have to rebuild per se, but that institutional knowledge loss of how the formulas were working and how to actually leverage and use that Excel-based model was that took a lot of time for us to just learn how to use that effectively.
Yep. Yeah, makes sense. Well, glad you're seeing improvements for sure. Let's see here. We got another question. Does this feed other systems?
Right now, no. This is a standalone system. What it does feed is our decision making, right? And what it does is kind of takes the mystery out of affordability. So we have, what we get is budget data comes out of our financial system and gets downloaded into a flat file for us that we have to do a little bit of massaging to before we upload it into Synario. So we do get another system feeding data into the Synario software. However, where it ends our output right now is basically on the cash flow summaries, and those we really key into those targets at the bottom to see, if we can afford a project, or if it's, like, say it's a regulatory project that is absolutely required, and how much of a rate increase would be needed to support that, or if we can find any project deferrals to support that, we can leverage that as well.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Tyler. Got one question here that I asked myself in the Q&A section here. What's next? What's next for you guys?
On in Synario, so yeah, one thing that we're really exploring right now that is kind of off of the radar is our grants program, right? And this is something that I also manage. I manage our grants program, and we're getting a couple million annually here, which is great, but it's not in our model right now, and it's not kind of showing that freed up pay-go that we have when we're able to fund our grants. So that is something that we're looking at right now, and how to enhance our model is how do we bring in kind of the full scale of our cash flow, which includes our grants, right? So that's a portion that we're trying to figure out how to configure, and that'd be our next steps for us here.
Great. Yeah. That's awesome. And then the only other question that I have here, I see we do have a little bit more time, but what has been the general reaction or response from leadership as far as the decision making changes that you've been able to recognize using the platform? How has leadership responded to all of this?
Yeah, Dean, you want to go ahead and take that one there?
Yeah, actually, good question, Michael. It's been very positive. I think before, the management team understood the finances and the rate model, but to have kind of an Excel spreadsheet, it just becomes a report and so forth. But now they're ecstatic. We go into meetings and they make changes, and we do live changes during the meeting. And it's much more efficient. They're able to make quick decisions on the fly. I mean, obviously there are other projects like what Tyler shared about the water treatment plant that takes a little more time, and those are bigger. But from a annual budget perspective and mid-year budget updates, this is so much more efficient. And we've actually seen now more engagement from our various divisions, and people have asked us to do presentations to the other divisions, our operations and engineering division and so forth. And so we're very pleased. People are more engaged. They better understand now that it's not a quick, update. We do some things behind the scenes, but it's quick from their perspective in making decisions. But Tyler, feel free to add anything else.
Yeah, I think I can recall one of the first meetings that we had when we had a bunch of initiatives configured, and we were able to toggle them on and off or on the fly, kind of, what if scenarios and decision making. And I can just recall our director, he kind of sat back in the chair with this little, I could see he was pleased, with the fact that we're able to do these different scenarios on the fly, where in the past, that would have been a lift to kind of print up all those different copies from those Excel files there. So to kind of be able to do that live and on the fly, we were, in a Teams environment. It was a remote environment all during COVID. But to be able to see those changes on the fly were great.
Awesome. Yeah, that's what we love to hear. Looks like we got another question that came in through the chat here. How has using Synario affected your financial stability?
Oh, this is great. This is excellent, actually. We are in the process right now of assessing our water and wastewater rates for rate increases. They have not seen a rate increase since 2020, and so we're managing those responsibly. We just went through a storm drainage fee increase here, and so it's definitely, we were able to use the tool and project out our costs and our capital program and everything there. So I would say for rate funded programs, this tool is excellent in forecasting what the needs are going to be, when we can target a rate increase and kind of get our politicians geared up for that and to demonstrate that need. Those of you who are in the rates world, you may understand that this is a very political thing. People are often standing in line to be at the docket for rate adjustments or fee increases or whatever. And so for us to be able to demonstrate our financial need and get our spot in line and be able to keep our financial health good, it's been a great tool so far. So yeah, we successful rate adjustment, and we are actively modeling for water and wastewater rate adjustments here in the future. So I would say I give it a 10 out of 10. We are loving the system for that.
Great. Thank you, Tyler. We have time for one more question here, unless anyone goes through on the chat and submits it. I have one myself, and it's really just if you could, if you could recommend one thing to others in the audience or to anyone else who's looking to do to onboard something like this to improve their decision making. What's the one thing that you would want someone to keep in mind as they go through this to ensure it's as successful as possible?
Can I take that one, Tyler?
Absolutely, go for it.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, thank you. The key thing for me is the ease of working with the Synario team and the implementation. I know change is hard, and sometimes software systems, you hear about this, you build it from ground up, and it never meets your needs. We had our cash flow summary as the outcome that we needed, and the Synario team listened to what our needs were, and they built it from the outcome of the cash flow summary. And then again, we didn't have to do any data input. I mean, that was just marvelous for us. And yes, we had a learning curve, but we've saved those videos now. They're archived. So if we have new staff coming on, we're able to utilize those videos as well. Versus, previously, like Tyler mentioned with the Excel, the knowledge base was gone. We kind of had to start from square one. So I would just say, kudos to the Synario team. And if you know what you need, their software is very powerful.
Oh, great. Well, thank you, Dean. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Brian, very much for the kind words and for your contribution during today's session here. Hopefully, everyone else found it as informative and as helpful as I did. A lot of interesting things to see how Sacramento is leveraging the platform, and more importantly, of course, improving their decision making process.